What's poppin', people? Today we are going to be reacting to Don't Overcomplicate Bodybuilding. It's simple to get jacked by intellectual meathead. I'll go ahead and put the video in the description down below. Now, just to start off premise-wise, I've got to say I kind of agree. In a sense, bodybuilding correctly is hard to do. But bodybuilding in general is not that hard. The biggest thing that really keeps a lot of people back from bodybuilding and doing it properly and doing it well enough and doing it successfully is getting in their own way. Thinking too much about, oh, I have to do this perfect number of reps, or oh, I have to, do this and then do this and then do this and then do this. 90% of the time, like, they're just adding extra stress to it. In the grand scheme of things, yes, it's pretty simple. Figure out which muscles you want to grow. Do a couple exercises for those muscles until you find ones that make you feel that muscle working. Then do those exercises until you can't do those exercises, and then eat protein and carbs and fats and make yourself recover, and then go do those exercises heavier next time. Pretty simple. But then you get into the math of how many calories do you need to eat, what is the most optimal exercise, all that, and that's where things start to get a little bit too overcomplicated. Obviously, I don't think that figuring out your calories is too overcomplicated. There's a certain level that you need to put into it. So it's not as simple as just lift weights, eat food, if you want to be really good. But it's not as complicated as a lot of people make it, especially if you're just trying to get in, do like a local show, just you're trying to get a better physique specifically. If you're just trying to look better, it's not as that complicated. So let's see what he has to say in here, and yeah, let's watch the video.
Experts, thousands upon thousands of them. It's like a plague, an epidemic. But a good deal of these experts have very little idea what they're talking about. They're usually just people who have really good genetics and build good physiques off of that. They then get a following and assume they must be geniuses in the art of fitness. These influencers appease the largest demographic of people, the untrained masses. Think of someone like V-Shred. They promise things like six-pack abs in 5 minutes or toned arms from weird movements with no weight. They often rely on spectacle and the apparent ease with which they make their audience believe they can get into shape. These are usually conventionally attractive people with mass appeal and are essentially marketing tools who are ultimately very unhelpful, which most people learn after they buy their first course from them and get literally no results. Free workout plan in the bio, by the way. There are, however, people who look like they would fall into this category but are great content creators, namely Mike Thurston. And if you're a beginner who just wants to get inspired by someone good looking with a great physique, but who actually has decent advice and a charismatic personality, he's my go-to. But these are not the influencers we're going to be talking about today. No, today we're going to be talking about science-based fitness influencers.
So he is right that kind of the first influencer group that he was talking about, it's funny he addressed that first, because that's kind of what influencers became in the fitness industry. That's the type of fitness influencer that's the classic fitness influencer, that's the making money for nothing and telling you, general silly advice, and that's the fake natty always, I just use L-glutamine, all that. And I do agree that was definitely a problem. And these science-based influencers kind of came in a new wave to combat that. So these science-based influencers are a lot of people, to be honest, usually around my age, usually around my level of education, maybe a little bit better, or maybe they're currently in school for a degree like this, exercise science. And so that's become a very popular degree at a lot of universities, and a lot of people are taking it, especially with how popular fitness became because of those first social media influencers. And so just like the whole fake natty content epidemic, if you will, it's getting that same sort of treatment, like a lot of people blow up, look amazing, they say they're natty, and then a lot of people blow up by saying, oh, they're not natty. So these people come around, the first people blew up because they were spraying BS, basically, and then these people come up because they're like, oh, I'm not spraying BS, all of my stuff is science-based. And yes, a lot of it is science-based, but the thing with exercise science is it's a new science. A lot of the science that you're talking about and you're basing off of is pretty brand new. And a lot of times, it's about to be broken by the next new thing because we're still learning things. And the other biggest thing about this science-based approach that really gets to me personally is the whole thing about science is breaking things down into a formula, explaining it one way, having the correct way. But with every single person being different, and this bodybuilding and weightlifting and fitness in general being a personal physical thing, it's gonna be at least a little bit different for everybody. So just always keep that in mind whenever you're looking at science-based stuff. Is overall, there's a few general concepts that are definitely the I guess you could say blanket apply, but even the most general concepts don't always blanket apply. I don't know. Take everything with a grain of salt. The more science based it is, the more I guess you can trust it. But remember, you're always different. You may not be this guy.
There is a massive problem with science-based bodybuilding. The problem initially stems from the sheer simplicity which is bodybuilding. Your objective is just to essentially fight gravity with specific muscle groups at one time to induce stress in your muscles and grow. This can be achieved in several different ways, which can be with dumbbells, barbells, pulley systems, or one's own body weight. Then it is just important to just add additional stress as time progresses and you get stronger to push further growth. And this is called progressive overload, and it's what leads to muscle gain. But like many things, people tend to overcomplicate the simple, to try to make it easier or more efficient. But despite being incredibly simple, bodybuilding is not easy, and over-theorizing doesn't help anyone grow beyond the effort they put into the sport. It's one of the few things in life where effort directly correlates to results, and trying to shortcut that often leads to a lesser outcome. Now look, I'm admittedly someone who loves to delve deep into the theory of anything I'm interested in. I like to understand why things work the way they do. Be that watches and learning the different mechanics and complications, music and the creative process through which artists create, and of course bodybuilding. And I don't think it's a waste of time. Understanding the functions and mechanics of muscles helps you understand what you need to do in order to achieve growth. But that and diet are the extent of what you need to learn. The problem comes when people begin to change the basics, claiming that old fundamental movements are somehow inefficient and should be replaced with overly complicated versions of pre-existing movements. Like a number of these science-based lifters claiming that the lat pull-down is ineffective, and over-engineering new ways to perform the movement, which are way too complicated, like moving at a 45-degree angle and tilting your wrists in a certain way for an extra 2% muscle activation. But yet the guys I see with the biggest backs built their backs from doing standard lat pull-downs and pull-ups. Or a lot of these nerds telling people that the standard bench press doesn't work and you need to twist your arm in a certain way and over squeeze and arch your back. And this may work for powerlifting, but that's not what we're talking about. Many bodybuilders have built incredible chests from bench pressing without overthinking their hand position or how their backs and glutes are involved in the movement. If the focus of the exercise is the chest, then that is all that should be considered. Learn enough form not to hurt yourself, but beyond that, go off of mind-muscle connection. Mind-muscle connection is the ability to consciously feel the muscle activation.
Probably not a great point to pause at right in the middle of the definition there, but before he gets on to the next thing, I think that's absolutely a fantastic point. One of the biggest things that holds people back, especially that I've noticed with clients while I'm training them, is they get too far into their head during a movement, trying to do the exact movement right, that they don't feel it in the muscle. They don't feel it in the bicep because they aren't thinking about the bicep. They're thinking about the wrist and the hand, and is the wrist turning, and are they keeping their shoulder back, and are they stopping their elbow from rising, and are they leaning forward, or are they leaning back? They're thinking about all these things, and they stop to think, do I feel this in my bicep? And I feel like all of us fall into this trap. Me, myself, I'm ADHD, I'm an overthinker. I fall into this trap a lot. And it's something that you can fall into not just in your exercise, but in your posing as well. You'll notice a lot of people overthink, overcomplicate their posing, and they don't notice it. It's something that's, because they're too focused on the exact angle they're supposed to be at and whatever. So, again, going back to what I was saying, everyone's a little bit different. The exact 90-degree whatever angle that you feel your bench press at may not be the same one I feel mine at, because my shoulders are a different width and my arms are a different length and I have a different amount of mobility and I have a different chest structure in general. Maybe I have a bigger rib cage, maybe you have a bigger rib cage. That's all different. So trying to put everything down to an exact science and exact number is always going to overcomplicate it and prevent you from being able to actually feel what's optimal. Also, again, just like his point with the exercises, just because something isn't in the exact range and plane of motion that that muscle specifically performs doesn't mean it's not a valid exercise for that muscle. It may recruit a couple other muscles. It may recruit a couple things in tangent with it, and maybe even the things that it recruits in tangent with it, it recruits more, but it's still probably going to work it. And the thing with your body is your body's a system. Your body is not individual muscles that move one at a time. So they have to work together. So a lot of times those movements like that lat pull down or like that bent over row do wind up actually developing your back as a whole better because you're not just recruiting the individual muscle that you're trying to recruit. You put so much focus on your lats, you're never going to have your supraspinatus, you're never going to have your teres, you're never going to have all those muscles defined. So your back double is going to look like shit 'cause you're not going to have any separation back there. So yeah, there's obviously something to be said about the exact isolation and individual training. I'm a big fan of isolation training and isometric training and working with single hands and with cables and things like that. I personally love all that sort of stuff, but just because that stuff works, it definitely doesn't mean that the other stuff doesn't work. And the best approach to everything is a little bit in moderation. Like I said, try a bunch of stuff, see what feels the best to you, and get really good at that personal approach. And the way you're going to get really good at that is with mind muscle connection.
When performing exercises, this allows you to focus on the proper muscle groups and achieve maximum activation and contraction. But this is only created through training fundamentals for a long time. And here comes the reason why I'm so annoyed at the science-based community. You'll notice that when you enter the gym, the only people performing these strange science-based optimal movements are usually skinny teenagers who saw them on TikTok. Why is that? Because established lifters who've already built an impressive physique know what works and they don't bother with strange movements because they got that big, not from doing an overextended tricep pushdown, but just feeling the tricep to activate in a standard movement. So these young impressionable kids come in and do overcomplicated stuff for no reason because they spend more time theorizing on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube than actually getting into the gym and training. They're thinking about becoming Mr. Olympia before they've even started. You shouldn't be figuring out how to optimize a Ferrari when you haven't got your shitbox to start. Or another analogy, you shouldn't be trying to drive like Senna when you haven't figured out how to drive around your neighborhood yet. There's so much confusing and conflicting information out there for beginners. Some person will tell them that the leg extension is completely inefficient and not optimal based on some obscure study from 1993 which had 3 test subjects and probably faulty equipment, but they'll fudge the data to prove a point. While someone else will say that the leg extension is the only way to grow big legs and squats and other exercises are worthless. So who does the beginner listen to? No one. They should try it out and see if it works for them, and it probably will.
Just like I was talking about with the studies, again, this is such a new study. Even the older studies are kind of new because no one really gave a crap when they came out. It's not very respected science up until very recently. Even the people who were studying science like this, it was only respected within the community. The degree sports and exercise sciences is the degree that I have instead of the fancy name kinesiology, and you have no idea what I hear about it. You just played all sports all day, etc. Instead of realizing we were learning anatomy, we were learning physiology, we were learning muscle mechanics, we were learning biomechanics, we were learning, kinesiology, everything. And a lot of these studies, again, just weren't taken seriously for that long. And another reason they're not taken seriously is because only one study was done, so no one took them seriously enough to do a follow-up and do a follow-up. Like what normally happens in scientific communities, they do a study, and 2 or 3 other labs will go and do the same study to confirm or deny the results. A lot of studies, especially in the bodybuilding and in fitness and in health communities, are individual studies that don't have other studies done with the same results to back them up. A lot of times, not all the times, but a lot of times. Also, a lot of times, the studies are done by companies and for companies in order to prove whatever the company wants them to prove in order to sell what they're trying to sell. Because the money has to come from somewhere. And if this isn't a super high priority, university thing, where's the money going to come from? Some company who wants to sell something. So something to always keep in mind with every study that you see. And another big problem, I don't know if he's going to address it, but that I've noticed specifically in the fitness community, and specifically in this science-based fitness community, is something that I was a victim of as well, is incomplete information. So there's so many people you'll notice start blowing up on TikTok because they look great and they start studying and they have science-based information, especially a lot of times if it is from a university program. They're in like year 1 of the university program. Maybe they're a junior, they finished their 2 years of undergrad, and now they're in their first year of their real studies, and you learn all this stuff because you're learning kind of the basics and the spread stuff. And one of the weird things that you'll notice as you learn, that's probably the same for a lot of different majors, is the next year what you learn is, yeah, that stuff's true, but not when this, and this happen. And a lot of things change. So they wind up making these big, bold claims and big, bold statements off of partial information, which, could definitely be true, but it's a kind of thing where it's like, you look at a wall and you see red, so you're like, the whole wall's red. When in reality, if you would have looked longer, you see that the wall's red here, but it changes to blue and white and everything like that. But you didn't even look to see that it changed to blue and white and everything, so you didn't take the time to look at it. Maybe you haven't had the time to look at it, but you just say the wall is red, when in reality, it's all these other colors. And that's something that happens kind of a lot in the industry, specifically in the major. Again, I did it too. I'm not trying to call anyone out. I was like that as well. I definitely said things like that. And then as I got later in, younger guys said things like that to me. So when I see videos like this that are kind of addressing it, and especially when I see the type of content that this video is addressing, that's one of those first things that I really want to point out is, just like anything, it's that with that small amount of education, you are an expert compared to 99% of people, because 99% of people haven't studied it. But it's base level knowledge, and you really need to start taking that base level knowledge at face value and understanding that it's under certain conditions, and then you need to also be able to apply it to other conditions. And the fact that pretty much any and every other condition is going to change everything that's going on.
The reason why there is so much conflicting and confusing information is that there are so many people who want to be online trainers in the space. But bodybuilding has been done for so long by so many people that most of us already understood. Sure, there's further room to learn more, but for the time being, it's kind of a waste of time unless you're an expert. But these trainers can't tell people to just do the standard exercises which are known to work. They have to differentiate themselves. They make up some new ludicrous variation of the exercise so they stand out. But really, all they're doing is confusing beginners. I love this sport. A lot of it is being ruined by creators making posts telling people that you're benching wrong or you're doing this wrong, and causing people to overanalyze their lifts and potentially do them wrong. We're all built differently.
I'm built different.
So if you tell someone to bench in the same way you do, they may end up using their shoulders more or hurt their arm or something like that. Some online trainers show people how
What was I just saying? How many times have I said that in this video? Sorry.
to figure out how their bodies work. Even Chris Bumstead has done that, and it helps people understand how they should train, and that's great. But that should be it. Guiding pathways that allow people to find the best way for them to train. Not nonsense about how you have to bench or squat or do anything with very specific movements. But the greatest sin of science-based lifting is it also takes a lot of the fun out of training. One of the joys of being a beginner is figuring it out as you go along. Figuring out what works best for your body and adapting based on that. We're all different. So finding out the best way for you to train should be a journey that you go on, not one which is pre-prescribed to you by some nerd in a lab coat, with exactly where you need to hold the bar or position your back or anything like that. But when you start by getting into doing weird stuff to try over-optimize, it takes away a lot of that joy. You should learn just enough to not get hurt and get lifting, growing, and becoming stronger with the basics. Godspeed.
That was fantastic. I gotta say, I agree with pretty much every point he made. He's getting a follow from that, and I suggest you guys too. If you guys like that video, you want more content like this, I'm also going to be doing some actual informational content for you as well coming up. I just got to start getting it scripted and planned, so I was able to pump out this reaction video for you. I'm going to be continuing to do this, trying to do it a couple times a week, so go ahead and hit the like, hit the follow, and I'll see you in the next one.